Previously on the Seventh Valkyrie, Val and Meridia clash, but eventually form an uneasy alliance seeking the Machine King. Several nights have gone by since then, and Val has been busy, but nothing could have prepared him for what happens tonight. Check it out next on the Seventh Valkyrie. Chapter 18. The Raptor and the Jackal. Val. The 15th day of winter, a few hours after nightfall. I sat in the darkness, nestled in the highest levels of catwalks, pulleys, and industrial equipment in a massive oceanside wharf. It had been hours, but finally the last light flickered in the offices of Mandarian Trading, which was one of the larger shipping organizations Meridia had given me to check. Their shipping wharf ran out to the water's edge, with hundreds of yards of water space to welcome vessels, ranging from mid-sized trading vessels up to smaller barges even. Above it rested a little eagle's nest where the supervisors and guildsmen could sit and keep an eye on the work going on. Well, what work there was. With the blockades, shipping had understandably slowed, and in an industry where money only came in when the ships did, that had consequences for everyone. Beneath me, the dock hands and chipsmen who hadn't been laid off or furloughed yet had long since made their way down towards the dock sides and the first-level bars to get their drinking in for the evening, which would probably be heavier than usual. That left only the guildsmen and clerks and runners finishing up the accounting and administrative tasks for the day. From the emptiness of the offices, I guessed each was doing work that was usually reserved for many men. If I remembered anything from my time in the military, it was that, unlike money, paperwork did not slow down no matter what happened. In fact, in difficult times it seemed like paperwork tripled, but that wasn't my business. Either way, even this late at night, as the hours dragged on, there were still 3 men in the office, busily working away. Finally, even the few stragglers began to filter out, chattering as they made their way down the spiraling staircases on either side of the office, leaving what I counted as 3 men still in the office, plus a guard at the bottom of each staircase. There were no extra guards tonight, no heightened state of awareness, no sign that our investigation had tipped off the Machine King. But, according to Meridia, that didn't mean anything, necessarily. After 3 batches of intel delivered smoothly, she was on edge, but I would never hold that against anyone. Gruff notes had accompanied the evening task she left in her desk this morning. Watch increased, surrounded on both sides I am. Command bastards kicked out the neighbors. Can't meet, tracked on the runs too. Narrowing down possibilities. Decent job. Be careful. Machine King always a step ahead. That was it, and it was as close as she'd gotten to any sort of positive encouragement, which made me smile. I'd remembered what I'd been like at her age, still fresh into the light corps and ready to bite the head off of anyone who reminded you that you weren't superhuman. She really was good, and she'd be a lot better with some better guidance, and whatever the dog shit training she was getting from modern Edera. I wondered where Ressa and Night Spirit had gotten off to. There was no sign of their skills in Meridia's training, and I couldn't put it past either of them to ever pass up the chance to mold a girl with so much raw talent. Both of them were probably dead at Heaven's Gate then. They'd been with me up until the final charge in the palace, but after that, well, the chaos of war had come over all of us, and even now, almost a decade later, it still felt like a blur. I returned my focus to the present and ran another scan of the dockside. From my vantage point, I could see the clerks burning the late-night oil, occasionally passing in front of the solitary, single lantern that still burned steadily for both of them. I stifled a yawn, rubbing my eyes and readjusting my perch among the catwalks so that my legs wouldn't fall asleep. Almost a full week working through the night was exhausting, especially when I was still training extensively alongside Edda and Rowan during the day. The fire belly freshener, as disgusting and unpleasant as it was to take, removed most of the physical fatigue, aches, and exhaustion, and I was eating enough calories to stay energized no matter how much I exercised, and I could thank the Brinsbor for that, but mental fatigue was another thing. day after day, night after night with very little rest, well, that took a toll even on me. And that was doubly true after last night, where a hard-working young clerk had been toiling away until well after midnight, leaving me only a precious few hours to carefully scan the office, copy the documents Meridia had demanded, and filter out with the morning crowds. This time, I reached into my coat and pulled out a handful of whipwater willow, an herb that grew along the edges of the Mandarin. I packed a cheekful. It was intensely aromatic, tasted like earthy crap, and it wasn't nearly as effective raw, but it gave a boost to the senses and sharpened your mind. Tiredness was for the weak-willed or the unprepared. I'd given Meridia's requested documents a once-over before I left her apartment. Mandarin Trading had lists upon lists of contracts to check, all tying them to the construction of the bridge and the workers that they'd brought in. I wasn't exactly sure how that was going to help us reveal the Machine King, but Meridia was convinced that it was some piece of the puzzle to discover what was off in the new city. For now, she was my only lead to the Machine King, especially with the old city on high alert. Previously, I had snuck back down to the outskirts of the old city with Edda and Rowan, but even then the tree lines had been visibly guarded. We had been able to make it past the first wave of defense, but beyond them, just a little further into town, there were armed X's from the families that visibly patrolled the streets, keeping watch on every angle. And I'm sure keeping an eye on the unseen world. Trying to sneak in now that they were expecting intruders, well, that was just suicide. Compared to the old city's defenses, breaking into a company like Mandarin Trading, who only had 2 night watchmen at the base of the stairs, that was child's play. Any good ranger could make the climb across the scaffolding that I had done, and it would have been even easier for the forest striders and mountain men and sky chasers, but I guess the Mandarin Trading brass assumed that X's just had no interest in their documents. But I did. The light moved in the office, so I chewed another pinch of whipwater willow, letting my eyes adjust as one of the clerks inside let their lantern rest on the desk. "Come on, don't just refill it," I muttered under my breath. But after a quick conversation, I saw the door open up, and they made their way down the clanging metal stairs, laughing and bitching about their bosses. It was go time. At the bottom of the stairs, the clerks exchanged a chuckle with the night watchmen, all complaining about getting posted late, and then the clerks headed out along the waterside to the wharf, disappearing from view. That was when I started to move. The roof was a grid of struts and support beams, each springing out from 12 larger support columns, 6 on each side of the covered channel that gave vessels access to the inside of the wharf. Fortunately, the roof struts were interconnected enough that making my way from the northwest corner closest to the water to the far eastern struts by the office was simple enough. It was doing so silently that was the tricky part, especially now that the sounds of the wharf beyond us had quieted even more. Still, I made my way across without incident, until I was perched on the last support strut about 10 feet from the office. The only problem now was actually getting inside the office. With a running start, I could make the jump to the stairs easily, but even the laziest night watchman would hear me land on a clanging staircase like that. There had to be another way in. Continuing my scan, I spotted a half-opened window overlooking the water just opposite me. They'd left it open to keep some fresh air in the office, I'm sure, but it was just enough of a gap for my needs. With a sprinting leap to grab the edge of the windowsill, and then a head-over-heels lift, I was in the office and laying out my equipment. First was the sealed inkwell and writing plume Meridia had provided, then the list of the documents she wanted, as well as a small travel light. On top of that, I packed another pinch of whip willow. This could be the long, boring part, and I needed my senses around me. Careful to watch the office windows for any reflection, I unsealed the travel light and twisted the wick down to barely a wisp. Then I drew a matchstick and lit the travel light and began the tedious process of checking every drawer, desk, and shelf for shipping manifests. I had only taken a quick scan around the room for any obvious hiding places when something caught my eye. A locked cabinet, bolted shut by an enormous padlock. That would be a nuisance, depending on the quality of it. I'd brought a few pins that I was reasonably confident with, but picking the lock could be another exhausting and time-consuming task. So I continued my sweep of the room, finding, to my surprise, an excellently cataloged wall of shipping documents sorted by organization and noted with date, project, and associated partners. It couldn't be that easy. I ran through the list quickly and found, again to my surprise, a well-wound binder marked under B for bridge. A first glance through, and I'd already spotted 2 matches to the documents Meridia wanted. Fuck, I guess sometimes you did get lucky. But as I started to turn towards the desk to begin transferring over the information, there was a crash beneath me, and I realized that this would not be one of the nights that I got lucky. There was a commotion somewhere beneath me, and then I heard the clanging of boots on stairs rushing up towards me. Quickly, I sealed the binder and shoved it back where I'd found it, then extinguished the travel light, returning the room to darkness. But that only solved the smaller of my problems. The clanging boots were making good time up the stairs, and no matter how dark the shipyard was, they would certainly see me if I dove out to hang on the windowsill or climb up onto the roof. Alright, fuck it. In 3 steps, I crossed the room and pressed up against the wall next to the door. It was like a child's hiding place, but it was the best I had. I steadied my breath and prepared myself for what I'd have to do if he discovered me. The clanging steps grew louder, and then with a hurried, scrambling clatter of keys, the door came swinging inward. I shifted to let it impact the wall. That's what they'd have expected. But I reached out to catch the doorknob before it swung back closed, holding my breath as I pressed back behind the door. God damn it, there was no way this was going to work. I was going to have to hurt Neterin. But as I listened, it seemed like I was the least of the clerk's worries. He wasn't one of the 2 men who'd left earlier, and this one seemed scared shitless, muttering under his breath as he scrambled for another set of keys and wrestled with the locked cabinet at the other end of the room. Cursing and panting, he pulled out a flapping pile of documents, flipping through them with a bunch of mumbles I couldn't make out, and then he locked the cabinet again. He took a deep breath of his own, tried to collect himself, and then raced back out the door, yanking it shut behind him and locking it afterward. I was once again left in darkness, alone while he clanged away down the stairs. Now my job was to resume copying the data, but curiosity brought me creeping to the window as the clerk reached the bottom of the stairs, hastily nodding to the guardsmen and heading out towards the front of the shipyard, where I could now see the light of 3 lanterns flickering in the darkness. The clerk raced over to the man at their head, taking a knee and offering the documents only to be struck so hard they left their feet. Laughter echoed out across the water, and then more lanterns came alight as men began to sweep out across the shipyard. Something was happening. Documents could wait. I stowed my inkwell, pen, travel light, and laid the room exactly as I'd found it, documents clearly nestled where they had been, and then perched up on the desk next to the windowsill, taking a deep breath in and out. Leaping 10 feet was a slightly harder jump without a running start, but after another silent leap, I was perched up in the rafters once more, and quickly made my way along the catwalks that lined the center of the shipyard, settling in among the shadows to perch and listen. Closer to the water, I had to strain to hear the quiet words as they carried, but it would have been impossible to not remember the smug, breathy, and derisive voice of that arrogant old man. What the fuck was the High Commander of Reen doing down there? The clerk had been dragged to his feet, still apologizing, but the commander had moved on to other things, speaking to his second command, a wiry man I didn't recognize who raised his voice in a Mandarian accent, telling the soldiers sweeping the shipyard to make sure they combed every inch or he'd have their hides. They continued their sweeps far below, while the High Commander stepped out towards the sea, muttering something under his breath, his shoulders hunched. He was mad. Mad enough that when the men returned from their sweeps, the commander struck the clerk again for really no reason, smacking the poor man right off his feet and then turning back to watch the ocean. And then there was nothing, at least for a little while. They waited there in silence for a few minutes, a twitching, frustrated silence in which I could feel the High Commander just begging someone to say something so he could hit them. But the clerk had learned his lesson well, and the other men lingered in loose formation behind the commander, eyes on the water. From where I sat in the rafters, I couldn't see what they were looking for, but I could absolutely tell when it arrived. The commander raised a hand, and the men scattered to vantage points around the shipyard. Some remained around the commander, weapons and armor gleaming even in the low light, while others scattered into the shadows on either side of the channel, their positions revealed by the sound of cranking crossbows. The commander and his second shared another thought, and more harsh words to the clerk, but the wind had picked up from the ocean, and it carried the specifics of their bullying elsewhere. There was another round of commotion from the men in the shipyard, some nervous adjustments, and then the commander and his second made a sign out to the water. Suddenly, the wind from out on the ocean died in an instant. Men brought their crossbows to bear, and a wave runner, powered by 3 cestrons, emerged from under the water and suddenly coasted gently into the shipyard, carrying a cargo of 4 armed scorchers, 4 heavily armed earth shifters, and standing at their center, the Jackal. Want to know what happens next? Join us on Patreon to become a hero of Edera and get early access to episodes along with bonus features, director's commentary, and the full Tabta archive. You can also find other ways to support us at the links in the description, and we will see you next week.